So Titania recently got some buffs that have made her, I think, pretty damn strong, so we'll have a look at it. I was going to talk about her just freely and willy-nilly, but you know what? Let's actually start this new series of videos where I give WarFrames scores based on certain aspects of gameplay. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Titania, like I said, got some buffs with the revised revision patch, so let's have a look at how powerful she is. But first off, let's have a look at her kit in general. What do her abilities do? Well, it's very simple. Her first ability, Spellbind, is an area of effect crowd control ability, but at the same time, if you decide to use it on yourself by holding one or even aiming on the ground like so, that is actually a status cleansing ability. Her second ability, which is Tribute, is now a cyclable buff production facility. So what you would do is you would cycle by pressing 2, tapping 2, and then if you hold 2, you get to actually activate the buff by targeting an enemy. Then by picking it up, you basically grab that buff. The buffs that are available are a buff that would decrease enemy accuracy, which is called Dust. We then have one that's called Thorns, which halves incoming damage, which is really good. And then we also have Entangle, which slows enemy movement. So let's actually activate all of those. And then we have a fourth one called Full Moon, which effectively increases the damage of all companion type allies. For example, your companions, your boas, your sentinels, and all that jazz. This also includes razor flies if you happen to have them. Her third ability, which is Lantern, is now basically a beacon of crowd control. So basically you activate it on an enemy, and then notice how these corrupted heavy gunners are basically not doing anything, so that's really interesting to use. And finally, her fourth ability is Razor Wing. By activating it, you become really small. You then get access to 2 exalted guns, i.e. a pair of exalted guns, and you also get access to an exalted sword. They are essentially arc guns and arc swords, so the arc gun does actually recharge and the arc sword doesn't have a stance. Titania's passive is also extra bullet jumping and extra rolling, which can also leave a trampoline that would affect allies and give them extra bullet jumping as well. So the aspects of gameplay that we're going to be scoring today are damage output, survivability, support capabilities, crowd control, and kit usability. So let's get into it. The first one is damage output. The bulk of Titania's damage output actually comes from her Razor Wing form. So if we activate her fourth ability and we go really small, most of her damage comes from her Dex Pixia, which are these weapons. So let's have a quick look at the build. So the build for Titania that I typically use is a build like this. It is a little bit different to a pure speed build, or even the build that I was using when I was testing out her speed compared to other Warframes. So we're basically going for high duration, high efficiency, and at least some strength. The idea is to be in Razor Wing as long as possible. At least that's how I would play her. If you play her a little bit differently, feel free to leave that in the comments. Now, the build for Dex Pixia is something like this, and I would also extend this to be the build that I would use for Dex Pixia Prime, specifically because this is a zero formal build, so I would expect Dex Pixia to, I believe, have the same amount of polarities as well, so probably end up building it like this. Now, Razor Wing's real power comes from using something like Razor Wing Blitz. So if we were to activate our Razor Wing like so, and then we were to use 4 basic abilities, for example Spellbind on ourselves 4 times, suddenly we can kill a lot of enemies really quickly. These are level 100 corrupted heavy gunners. Yes, I am doing headshots, so if we do body shots, it's still pretty damn fast. And this is because Razor Wing Blitz is capable of increasing the fire rate of the Dex Pixia to be absurdly strong, and that is really powerful. My main problem with Dex Pixia though is when you run out of ammo, there is this sort of burst fire kind of thing that happens because the Dex Pixia is trying to reload. I don't particularly like that myself. So naturally, the way to fix that would be to use something like a rank 5 Arcane Pistolier. On headshot kill, 60% chance for 102% ammo efficiency for 12 seconds. 102% ammo efficiency actually basically means 100% ammo efficiency. It's just like a rounding error, I think. Bottom line is, you don't use any ammo when you have Arcane Pistolier active. So how does this look? Well, basically, if you get a headshot kill, you can then just continually fire, and I love this. This is a ton of fun. and now it's finally inactive. Now, of course, Titania also has her sword, which is called the Diwata. So it is a sword. It is also affected by Razorwing Blitz as well. But I don't feel like it is all that strong. It's entirely possible that the build that I am going for is a bit crap. That's possibly true. If you have a Diwata build that you like to use, feel free to leave it in the comments. Keep in mind that these guys are fours, which means that melee damage should actually be increasing as if it were stealth melee. So, you know, if it's taking this long with Razorwing Blitz and stealth damage, quote unquote, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like this weapon is all that strong. So for full reference, here is the build that I'm using for the Diwata. It is a one former build, and I suspect the one former is actually to put a D polarity for healing return. I'll explain that a little bit later. The potential saving grace is that if you decide to use something like Sacrificial Steel, it does bring the critical chance up to 64%, which might make a difference, but I'm not entirely sure. Either way, I don't feel like this weapon is all that good. However, perhaps there may be a way of making this weapon a little bit better with the use of Beguiling Lantern, which is a lantern augment. Attracted enemies take 100% more melee damage. Now, this is actually affected by power strength. So with my build at 130% power strength, obviously, Beguiling Lantern increases melee damage by 130%. So against the exact same enemies in the exact same scenario where our weapon should be doing stealth damage, quote unquote, we appear to be doing about 1,000 damage per swipe. That is the number that I'm seeing. I don't know. I don't really feel like it is worth it, especially when you have a weapon like Dex Pixia, which seems to be really, really strong. So overall, with Dex Pixia being really, really fun and really, really powerful, the fact that she does have a very disappointing sword in Diwata means that I would actually give Titania's damage a score of 9 out of 10. The disappointment of her sword alone would have dragged her score all the way down to maybe a 5 out of 10, but those Dex Pixias really are carrying her damage by quite a fair margin. If DE were to ever do something to Diwata to maybe give it a buff, then perhaps she would have a perfect 10 out of 10. But until then, it's entirely possible that I'm using them incorrectly, but at least to me, I don't think they're all that good. Alright, let's talk about Titania's survivability. Now, right out of the gate, just pure numbers, Titania has a very average amount of shields and health at 300 each, but for her armor, it's actually below average at 100. 100 armor is now the lowest amount of armor that any Warframe has. It used to be 65 with Warframes like Banshee, but that has actually been buffed to 100, so Titania does actually have the lowest armor value of every Warframe in the game. Now, of course, shields are a lot better now with shield gating and the shield damage reduction from just shields in general, but that typically doesn't mean a whole lot. In the end, things like toxin damage will kill her instantly anyway, but also just being two-shotted as opposed to being one-shotted by a bombard, for example, at a particularly high level, that's not that big of a difference in the long run. Instead, Titania actually relies more on enemies missing for her survivability. So, for example, if you jump into Razorwing, we have a 50% evasion bonus. So, in a typical game, when you are running around as Titania, you might find yourself getting hit a lot more than if you decide to fly around as the Razorwing. Furthermore, the Razorwing does make her a lot smaller, which does make her a harder target to shoot. That's just typical gameplay shenanigans. Have you ever tried shooting a smaller target? They're typically really, really difficult to hit. Furthermore, enemies are more inclined to attack Razorflies. So Razorflies are these little things that are flying in front of this corrupted heavy gunner right now, and they are distracting the ever-loving crap out of this corrupted heavy gunner. We could be really close to the corrupted heavy gunner and they are basically not going to attack us at all until those razor flies are dead. Now there is a way of healing those razor flies by actually killing the corrupted heavy gunner, but nobody knows how much you're actually healing them by. You can also use a mod like Agility, Drift, and Aviator in order to increase your overall survivability, but in my personal opinion, I feel like that is probably a bit on the overkill side. Typically, just by making sure that enemies are not hitting you, you don't really need to worry about reducing any damage taken. Now, Titania is capable of healing herself by using the Duwata. This is the reason why I've actually put healing return on it. So, like so, I have actually healed myself. This is of course not really a healing ability like Oberon's Renewal, but I will count it as some form of self-healing. As Titania tends to rely more on dodging enemy fire than just face tanking all of it like Naros, I would give her survivability a score of 6 out of 10, with the caveat that so long as you keep moving, you typically don't end up dying. Alright, let's talk about Titania's support abilities. Now, Titania has two support abilities in the form of Spellbind and Tribute. With Spellbind, what you can do is you can actually use it on an ally, like so, and then that ally will have some effects on them to indicate that they are affected by Spellbind. We too are also affected by Spellbind because it is, after all, an AoE ability. The idea is that any ally, and yourself of course, who are affected by Spellbind are completely immune to status procs, which can be really useful in certain situations. For example, we're able to prevent any slash or toxin procs. We're also able to avoid any magnetic procs, which I find to be really annoying. We also are capable of just completely bypassing the whole radiation part of a radiation sortie, so that is very strong. Keep in mind that when you're using a weapon like the Kuva Brahma that now has self-knockdown, if you were to use something like Spellbind on yourself, it actually also bypasses the self-knockdown, so that is very useful. And in terms of tribute, the main support tribute is the Thorns tribute because it is an AoE effect aura that reduces all incoming damage by 50%. It also reflects that damage back at the enemy target. This affects allies, so if the allies are able to stay within the distance that the Thorns aura has in terms of its AoE, then they will also be taking 50% less damage. But if you're in something like Razorwing and you're flying away, then obviously, if they can't keep up with you, they're not going to get that particular bit of support. So since Titania has one support ability that, you know, it's very strong, but there's not that many opportunities to use it, as well as an aura that can be very powerful if her allies stay near it, I would give her support a score of 6 out of 10. Alright, let's talk about Titania's crowd control. Now, Titania has a lot of crowd control options to use, so let's have a look at all of them. The first one, of course, is Spellbind. So Spellbind is an area of effect disable. Anyone who is affected by Spellbind basically won't be doing anything. They will stay in place as long as you don't attack them, but if you do decide to attack them, they will fly away, depending on the weapon, of course. If you were to use something like the Xenoid Gamma Core, they won't fly away, but I do find that bullet-type weapons, such as Soma Prime, will actually cause them to sort of start to float away. They seem to have also dropped their guns as well, which is very interesting. I suppose then when they drop down, they are effectively disarmed, and they would have to go and pick up their weapons, or maybe not even doing that. Her second ability, being Tribute, does sort of work as a single target knockdown ability, so you can use it for that purpose as well, although really the main purpose of using the Tribute ability is to get those buffs back. Her third ability is Lantern, which is actually a duration-based area of effect disable that will attract enemies, provided these guys actually get attracted, but these enemies here are actually being affected by Lantern in the correct way. Notice how even when we are standing right next to them, they are refusing to attack us. Why? Because they're more interested in the Lantern itself. Like moths to a light. That is basically the idea. And the big thing, of course, is that the Lantern doesn't fly away anymore. So even if you attack it, the lantern stays perfectly still, and that is really, really good. So with all of these ways to disable her enemies, I would give Titania a perfect 10 out of 10 score for crowd control. Now keep in mind that a room of enemies that are not attacking you because they're affected by lantern, for example, or because they're all affected by spellbind, for example, this does obviously contribute to her overall survivability, but technically doesn't really count as survivability because, again, it's not like she's being an actual tank with self-healing abilities. So before anyone says anything like that in the comments, crowd control and survivability are totally separate things. And finally, let's have a look at Titania's overall kit usability. Because Lantern doesn't float away, and because Tribute is now a toggleable, cyclable thing, which means that something like Full Moon can be used a lot more often, all of Titania's abilities are super duper useful, and I have no real issues in just using them willy-nilly, especially since you can actually activate every single one of them in Razor Wing form, so that's really, really good. However, her passive, to me, doesn't seem all that good, specifically the part where it gives allies bullet jump trampolines. Like, ask yourself this, have you ever really made good use of your allies bullet jump trampoline? I sure haven't. So, I don't know, I feel like maybe there needs to be something else to be done for that passive in terms of giving it to allies. So otherwise, I would give Titania's kit usability a score of 9 out of 10. The idea is that for each of the 4 abilities, there would be 2 of the 2 points given, and then for her passive, it would just be 1 of the 2 points because it's good for her, but it's not really all that useful for her allies. So when you take all of these numbers, 9 out of 10 for damage, 6 out of 10 for survivability, 7 out of 10 for support, 10 out of 10 for crowd control, and kit usability 9 out of 10, that would bring Titania's overall score to an 8.2 out of 10 by averaging those numbers, which effectively means that Titania is an 8 out of 10 Warframe, rounding to the nearest number. Titania is, in my opinion, really, really fun to use, and with Titania Prime coming out, she's definitely going to be a Prime Warframe that I probably will be just straight up buying through Prime Access because I don't really want to farm that stuff, I just want to get to use her instantly. So yeah, she's really, really good at completing pretty much every available mission right now because raids don't exist. So yeah, I would definitely recommend her 100%. So let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Do you think that this kind of scoring method is actually good? Let me know in the comments. If you disagree with any of the comments or even any of the scores that I have given for Titania, no matter what aspect it is, feel free to make your case in the comments below and we can always have a look at how we think. Obviously, if you want to figure out what your personal score of Titania would be, it's just simply changing those numbers and then adding them together and dividing by 5 because that is the average of those scores. So hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Warframe content, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.